Today, I'm joined by professional ice hockey player Jake Kugler. Jake played 2 seasons for the Orlando Solar Bears of the ECHL and later played pro in Denmark for the Odense Bulldogs. Throughout his playing career, Jake would sustain multiple serious injuries that would later plunge him into a harrowing battle with anxiety and depression. Today, he's here to share his story. How's it going, Jake?
It's going. It's been a tough few months, I won't lie, but we're on the way up, to say the least.
That's good to hear, man. Uh, so tell me a bit about your childhood and how you first got introduced to the game of hockey.
Yeah, so I was born in St. Catharines, Ontario. Um, I'm one of two boys. I'm the oldest. My parents said, from a little being a little baby in the jumper, they put me in front of the TV, and I wouldn't leave until the hockey game was over. And if they tried to drag me away, it was a big temper tantrum. So Um, but yeah, no, I had the typical Canadian hockey childhood. Every weekend was at the rink, and you could find me kind of one of three places. I was either in the basement playing mini sticks or in the driveway shooting pucks, or I was down the road playing road hockey with friends. So my days are spent with a stick in my hand, and it's been like that ever since. So
So you broke into the QMJHL when you were 17, first for the Gatineau Olympiques, and played there for 3 full seasons. You later bounced around, played for the Charlottetown Islanders and Halifax Mooseheads before later playing university hockey at St. Mary's. Can you speak a bit about your experience in the Q?
yeah, I loved my time in the queue. Honestly, you don't expect to play for three teams. That's usually not the goal, but no, I made a lot of great friends, friends that I'm still friends with till this day. I played in Gatineau for three, like you said, and I just felt like my opportunity wasn't coming, so I needed a little bit of a change up, and I ended up getting traded to Charlottetown, and I loved it there. I got a great opportunity there. I fell in love with the game again there. I did very well, and then at the time, I was really upset to get traded to Halifax because I loved Charlottetown so much. But once I got to Halifax, I mean, that's one of the best organizations in all of the CHL, and it's a treat to play in front of 10,000 fans a night. And I was fortunate enough to play with Nico Heischer, and you get to play with guys like that. So that's a real treat. And I ended up loving the city so much that I stayed in Halifax for school for 2 years after that, and I really enjoyed my time there.
Sounds great. Did you ever have any major injuries or any struggles with mental health throughout your time in the Q or in your teenage years?
Yeah, I separated my shoulder actually my first exhibition game of my draft year. Um, that was pretty deflating, but at the time I was young. I was 17, and um, I was hungry at that time. You don't really think about, you're not dwelling on the injury too much. It's how fast can I get back, and how fast can I get back and play. And so that didn't really affect me too much, to be honest. I was just really driven to getting back with the boys, and trying to give myself the best opportunity to get looked at. So I would say by the end of my time in Gatineau that I was a little deflated again. I felt like um, I just wasn't getting the shot, and that's when I asked for the change, and I had a major upshift in emotionally and in my career. So Charlottetown was a really big rejuvenation for me in that sense.
So after the QMJHL, you start playing university hockey at Mary's. And shortly after that, there's a short stint in Slovakia, and there's a whole story in itself there with your visa. Um, but shortly after coming back to North America from Slovakia, you signed in Orlando. Tell me how that worked out.
Yeah, so obviously that Slovakia situation was completely unorthodox. This is something out of a spy movie, to be honest. It was insane. Kind of a funny story. You hear those Europe horror stories, but no, I was at home for about 3 weeks, and we were kind of just waiting to hear, is anything going to happen? And by that third week, as a player, you're just like, well, I got to figure something out here. I want to play. So it actually, I reached out to Orlando, the coach, Jake Garhowski there. And I said, here's my situation. I'm looking for a place to play. And then a week later, he got back to me. And it's a funny story, actually. The day he offered me a contract was the day that Slovakia informed me that my visa was ready. And I was like, oh, well, what do I do now? Kind of thing. You know, you don't want to really quit on a team. Um, and yeah, my parents and I went out for dinner, and I said, all right, we each grabbed a napkin, and I said, write down where you think I should go. And we all wrote it down and flipped on three, and every one of us had Orlando. So um, it was nice to be close to home. Obviously, it's an incredible place to play. You know, you're in Florida, in the sun by the pool. So it was kind of a no-brainer at that point.
Yeah, sounds like an awesome place to play. But
Absolutely.
yeah. Unfortunately, though, you were injured in that first season in Orlando. Walk me through what happened in that play.
Yeah, it was kind of just a fluke play, to be honest. I didn't get hit or anything. It was kind of just by my own doing. I was playing the wing at the time, and we were back checking. One of our D stepped up, caused a turnover, and it was just a quick transition play where I kind of changed the direction and went to bust up ice, and I kind of did like a mohawk turn, like Sid always does, and I just felt a big pop in my hip. I heard it too. And my leg all of a sudden just got, I lost all my strength. It got really hot and spicy sensation down it. And that was in the first period. And stubborn me, I just kept deciding to play. I told the trainers obviously, but I said I was good to go. And I remember every shift I would get off and I couldn't sit on the bench. I had to sit in a deep squat. I couldn't stand up straight. And obviously when you're in a skating position, you're kind of hunched over. So it wasn't too bad for me, but yeah, I'd get to the bench, I'd be in this deep squat, and then we finished the game, and I was keeled right over. I couldn't stand up straight, so I knew I was in a good chunk of trouble there. But yeah, it turns out that I had a torn labrum, and I needed surgery. So I ended up getting surgery, and 2 weeks later, COVID hit, and the season was over anyways. So
Yikes! That's awful, man. What was that recovery process like? Were there one or a couple moments during that rehab that really stood out to you?
it was a very unorthodox, very up and down, emotional wise process, I would say. I think I was one of the last people to get surgery in Florida before they shut down for COVID. So thankfully, they squeezed me in. I couldn't walk for a full month, so I was in my apartment, and my team trainer would come in and do some rehab with me. When the month was over, I rented a car and I drove home. I got linked up with a physio guy here, and he was amazing. I can't thank him enough. But there was always something. There was always a little nick. You know, they told me that I should be good around six months, that I should be back to normal, and that just wasn't happening. I had some things where I couldn't get my knee above 90 degrees, and we worked on that for a long time, and finally figured that out. And I thought, okay, like perfect, now I'm back, type of thing. I got back to skating. My first skate, I felt just a major pull in my hip flexor area, and I was basically on the shelf again. So it was just kind of like a one step forward, two step back type of process. Then I went out to skate my second time. I waited like a week and a half after that time. I did the same thing again, and I'm like, why does this keep happening? I don't understand. It turns out that I tore my quad as well, along with my hip, and we just didn't know that. So I had to then go to Toronto and get PRP injections and do all this stuff, and it was just lingering all along. And by the time I was fully good to go, it was somewhere over the 8-month mark, and I was just, my mind was in a blender, to say the least.
Yeah. So during that rehab process, and as you're trying to get back in the ice, as you're working to kind of fix your own body, how did this affect your mental health and other aspects of your life?
Yeah, it's deflating. It's like I said, it was one step forward, two steps back, and you know when they're telling you, you know, you should be fine by now, you should be okay, and you're not. Like, you're not even close. It just turned in for my experience just constant overthinking. You know, what's going to happen? Am I going to be able to play again? And is this going to affect my everyday life at this point? You know, I got back to eventually playing in Orlando. I missed training camp, and I was playing and I felt good. And there was one instance where I got home one day from practice and I was sitting down to eat just like every day, and I couldn't get out of my chair. And, you know, once I finally got myself up and out of the chair, I took 2 steps, I fell over in my kitchen. And, you know, as a 24-year-old, you're like, what the hell's going on? So yeah, it was constant overthinking, and then conversations of, you know, maybe a second surgery needs to happen and things like that. Well, at that point, you know, it's way beyond hockey. This is life at this point. I'm 24 years old, about to have double hip surgery potentially. You know, I want to be able to walk without pain every day. I want to be able to eventually run around with my kids one day. You know, it turned me into just a constant spiral, I would say. And, you know, and I neglected the surgery because at the time, you know, a double hip surgery at 24 as a hockey player, you're done, you know, and I wasn't ready to be done with the game. And they said, you know, it's a matter of when, not if. So I said, okay, if that's the case, then I'm going to play, because that's what I love to do. And I can't do another 6 to 8 months of what I'd been through already. So I pushed it, and my body just wasn't ready. I ended up tearing my MCL on the exact day that I had surgery the year before. And it's creepy, it's fluky. And that was the kicker for me. I spiraled emotionally. I completely shut off. I was overthinking everything. I remember just being on my phone every day and people trying to talk to me, and I wasn't even in the same room. You know, I like to use the term like physically there, but mentally gone. I was a completely different person. I developed terrible anxiety. I couldn't leave my house. I didn't want to leave my bed. I couldn't leave my house unless I was with somebody that I knew. And it was terrible. I don't really know how else to explain it.
It sounds awful. During this whole process, just how bad did it start getting, this mental health?
It got to the point where I stopped eating. I think I lost 12 pounds. In my story, I kind of touch on it, where I was going to the rink, you know, I was in a knee brace still. I was just trying to be part of the boys the best I could be. So I'm sitting in the room, and, you know, it's a dressing room, you know, you're taking jabs left and right, you're dishing them out. And somebody goes like, you look sick, man. Like, you look ill. Your eyes are sucked back into your head. Like, what's wrong with you? And I just played it off. It was just a fake smile. Like, oh yeah, I'm cutting season to look good for the pool, you know? In reality, I was dying inside, to be honest. It got so far past my injury, it felt like I took like a backseat in my own body. Someone else or something was controlling me. I lost me completely. By the end of the season, I look back at photos and I don't even recognize myself. Honestly, there's a lot of pain, and I was just fighting to put on this persona that I was okay and that I was happy. And each day was, I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to be there.
In your story, you mentioned how you heard about Jonathan Drouin's struggle with mental health. How did this affect you during this time?
Well, in my story, I kind of touch on that I had signed in Denmark and I was still in a knee brace. And, you know, I had told them outright, you know, I'm not ready physically at all. I totally neglected the mental side of it, because I thought I was so prideful in myself that I was just like, oh, this will pass. it's nothing. So I was only focused on my physical being, and they said, by August you'll be fine. We'll work with you. We won't push you too far. You'll miss a couple exhibition games. You'll be ready for the season. Well, on an organization that's never seen you play before, to have that much faith in you, it's pretty flattering, especially when you're in the position that I was in. So I took the deal and I went, and it was the worst choice that I've ever made in my life. Not because of the organization and the team. They gave me everything that I could ask for as a player. Gave me, a nice apartment, all of the opportunity on the team. I was a zombie. That's how I would describe it. I became the guy that would be the last one to the rink and the first one to leave. The ice was kind of always my escape as a player. Nothing in my life off the ice would ever transpire onto it, and my time on the ice became tainted. I didn't want to be there. I raced home to get in bed every single day, and there was just one game where we went to the rink and I made some excuse not to morning skate so that I could get home earlier. And I raced home to get in bed like every other day, and I was just scrolling Instagram and I saw Jonathan's story and I broke down. And my poor mother was up with me. Obviously there's a massive time change, and she was up at the wee hours of the night, trying to talk me off the ledges, to be honest. I saw his story. I broke down because it was pretty much me. And it never once crossed my mind to step away from the game while going through all of this. And I finally just stepped back and was like, this is something that I need to do, because there's no way out of this right now for me. So I ended up playing that night. I can't tell you how I got to the rink. I can't tell you how I got dressed. I remember coming to, and I was on the bench getting the pat on the back to go on the ice for my first shift. And I think we were on the power play. And I got hit on the power play. And I just remember looking up and being like, I'm done. This is it. I skated off the ice, and, the doc said, you're not looking too hot. We're going to take you out for the night. And the amount of relief that I got from him telling me that I wouldn't have to go back on the ice I've never had that as a player. And I knew that it was time to step away and kind of deal with my own stuff. So I ended up coming home, and yeah.
And you mentioned how this whole struggle really took you to some very dark places. And in one of your darkest moments, you mentioned how you heard something. What did you hear?
Yeah, it's a sensitive one. I don't really go in that area of the house anymore. So I've got two young puppies, and we spoil them. We buy them a lot of treats, a lot of toys. So I was in the garage, and I heard a dog toy go off in a box, and obviously I was alone, and it goes like, no, and it scared the hell out of me. Obviously I was a mess. I kind of was like, I was processing what it was and thinking like, there's no way that this could be happening right now. And it was a time of reflection for me. How could I let my mother find me like this? How could what I'm about to do and try and end my pain bring so much more onto them? And so I stepped back and I put everything away, and I set the bench back down, in the corner, and it goes, "That's better." And I like baffled. I work out in there every single day. I bang and crash around in there. We park cars in there. Never once had this thing gone off, ever. So at this point, I'm like, there's no way that this is happening right now. Like, am I hearing things? What is going on? So I went in the box to try and get it. And I found it, and I sat there for probably half an hour, and I whacked it over and over, trying to get it to repeat what it had said. And it didn't. There were only 5 preset phrases, and neither of them were what it had said to me. So just, you hear stories like that and you kind of shrug them off all the time. Like, yeah, right. You'd probably do something else, or I was alone in that room. And that's what happened to me.
Looking back on it, how do you see that experience? Have you attributed any higher meaning to this? Have you tried to rationalize it in any way? What does that mean to you?
The amount of times that I've gone over that scenario is probably up to 1,000 at this point. I say in my letter that I'm not a religious person or a faithful person, but how can you not attribute it to something higher? I took it as, you're supposed to be here. It's surreal. Like, there's nothing in that garage like that. I just say, you're lost for words, honestly. And then I've gone over it 1,000 times in my head, and I'm still at this point of, how do you explain something like that, other than the fact that someone or something was looking over me and that I'm supposed to be here still.
What were the days following this experience like? What happened in the hours, the days, and the weeks after this?
Obviously, a lot of reflection, a lot of shame. I didn't tell anybody about this. At that point, I was like, you need to get help. You need to vocalize this. You need to tell somebody. So I told my mom, not to the extent of what had fully gone down, but I told her, obviously my family's concerned. I'm home in November. That's never happened before. I'm supposed to be playing hockey. So obviously people knew that something was going on, but not to the extent of what was really happening. So I reached out to her, and I found a therapist here, and I started seeing her, and she was the first person that I told this story fully to, because it's hard, and these are hard conversations to have. These are, how could you ever tell your mother that that you got to that point that would kill her? So yeah, I think it was probably 3 or 4 days later that I spoke up to her, and I had my first session and got some help.
That's really great to hear that you did get help and that you're dealing with this in the right way. Your story, like you've written it out, and it is incredible to read. It's so full. It's full of emotion. It's full of personal reflection. It's full of a lot of dark tones, but I think it's also full of a lot of hope. What made you want to share this story, and why do it now?
I started writing all of my emotions down in Denmark. It was really the only thing that I had to express, or I thought maybe, if if I get this stuff out of me, then I won't feel as bad anymore. So I had kind of summarized it all into this piece. I wrote this piece because I wanted it all on one paper, and I wanted to have something to tell my family and my friends, because they're the closest ones to me, and they need to know, what had gone on with me. And it was a step in my recovery process as well. But like I said, it's a hard thing to tell your parents that you've been to this level. It's even harder to tell your grandmother or your grandfather that, this is what happened in my garage while you were down the road. It's tough. And so I wrote this in preparing to tell them this. And I sent it to my friends actually first, because it was a touch easier. And I sent it to 3 of my friends. 2 of them came back with, obviously, I'm so sorry you're going through this. I want you to know that I've also been through something very similar and been in a very similar spot. And I had no idea of that. And these are my best friends. And the 3rd person reached out and said, hey, would you mind if I sent this to my brother? Because actually last night he confronted me and broke down, and I had no idea that he was hurting. And I'm kind of sitting there like, well, this is the first time I've ever sent this out, and this is 3 for 3 people that I care about and that I'm close to. I can't imagine how many more people are sitting there in silence and hurting. And I just thought, why would I hold on to this then? If this can help somebody else, I already have one person asking if they can share it. And it's the first time I've ever sent it to anybody. Why can't I be an advocate, or, maybe it's one of the reasons that I spoke out, because somebody else spoke out. It's what made me finally tell my mom that, hey, I need to step away from this game, because I saw Jonathan Duran's story. And, if I could be that for somebody else, then that's incredible to me. I was very reluctant. I sat on this for a few weeks. I didn't want, people's pity. I didn't want attention. I just didn't want it to be looked at as that. But as soon as I sent it to my friends and they said, hey, I've heard like that before. Can I please send this to somebody else? Why wouldn't you speak up? Especially, I'm scrolling Instagram and I see that it's Men's Mental Health Month, and I'm reading the stats of, 75% of all suicides are men. Men are less likely to speak up. And it's true. I mean, I didn't speak up for the longest time because, as a man, you're supposed to be this tough figure who can handle anything. And it was a major pride thing for me. I don't need help. I'm fine. This will roll off my back. I'll be okay. And, some battles aren't meant to be fought alone. There are some things that you can't handle, and you need a helping hand. And I really hope that with the release of my experience throughout all of this, it really displays that, you need to ask for help. You have to, because if you don't, it festers, it grows, it snowballs, and it becomes something that almost feels unbeatable.
You talk about how being a man, you're meant to kind of push these feelings away and just deal with it and act tough. I think it also speaks to what hockey culture has become. I think, especially in these last couple weeks and months, we've seen, what's looking like a major upheaval of hockey culture. You look at the Chicago Blackhawks investigation and the Kyle Beach situation. Akeem Aliu, John Doe 2, and a lot of players are coming out with all these different stories, showing everybody and showing us especially that silence is so dangerous in that kind of environment. There are players that are coming out more and more all the time. Jonathan Drouin, you mentioned. Carey Price came out with his own struggles and checked himself into the NHLPA's player assistance program shortly after. Robin Leonard's spoken about his struggles with mental health. It seems like in the hockey world, with the biggest stars coming out and saying that they're not okay, that they need to step away from the game, I think it speaks so much to how big of an issue this is. I think it's so important that we start getting more of these stories out here and we start really talking about this. We've talked about it before, right? We've seen so many people expressing these stories, but we haven't really had these deep conversations. We haven't really heard these deep stories. I think it's so important that all kinds of these stories are getting shared around the world.
I agree 100%. I mean, it's nice to see a snowball effect in the other direction, if that makes sense. I mean, from my experience, not speaking and trying to handle it by yourself, it snowballs into something so much greater. It feels like it's almost unbeatable. And now, it's people speaking out and it's one after another. And I remember years ago when Bobby Ryan actually was one of the very first guys to go into that program. And, everybody was saying, it's a great thing. But there was really you didn't really hear of any traction after that one. It was kind of like its own little thing, which is fantastic for him. But now it's one more guy, two more after that and things like that. And, obviously they have a platform that not a lot of people have, and that's great. And, it helps someone like me. I'm thankful that this is the direction it's going, and I hope that my story just adds to it.
And going back to your story, to someone reading it or to someone even watching this interview, what would be your message to someone who's struggling from depression or anxiety or any kind of mental health issue?
You have to speak. You have to talk. I know that it seems like it's such a hard thing to do, and it is. It's incredibly hard. But from my experience, if I had have spoken up at the beginning, that conversation is a whole heck of a lot less hard than the ones that I've had to have now. You're not alone at all, ever. There's people that care about you. There's people that love you. Whether it be a friend or a family member or anything like that, you need to speak up.
Well, it's great that you are speaking up, and I think this can truly help someone else, or like you said, even if it's one person that sees this story and is able to kind of gather the courage to speak up about their own struggle. I think that's more than worth it for what we're doing here, for what you're doing here. Jake, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you and work with you on this story. I think you're going to do great things with this story. I think people are really going to benefit from hearing it. Thank you so much for doing this.
No, thank you guys, for dealing with me through all of this, making the process so easy. And just thank you for being that avenue that I could tell people, for sure.
No problem, man.